This morning I awoke to visions of fire and steel. These nightmares come more often now that I have seen my beloved Bretonnia eaten away by years of war, but hope stirs in the realms of men, for when Damoiselle de Guerre leads her people into battle, a darkness is lifted from our hearts, and they can face any abomination with the strength and conviction one would expect from the ladies' Grail Guardians. We're back on SFO Grimhammer and the Sundering update as the Dark Elves of Ganeth square off against the Living Saints of Lyon. It's going to be a very top-heavy Bretonnian build in this one, about as elite as you can possibly get while still having a functional army. Repanse has her Fleur-de-Lis banner, which lowers her melee stats because, waving a big flag around isn't very conducive to slaying bad guys in a melee brawl, but it makes her unbreakable and gives her the Light of the Lady passive. Ward saves, leadership, AP damage, and reload skill for anybody nearby, so when Bretonnia flocks to her banner, they become beasts. Other than that, her kit is very much the same in SFO, but her bodyguards are not. Completely different animals, Grail Guardians are. 12 models, 1000 HP per entity, regen from Grail Vitality, and just a banana stat line. They are absolute monsters. They even have AoE attacks, so for clearing through infantry, they are fantastic. They don't take up much space, and they don't do a good job of blocking charges or defending a back line, but on the attack, they can stuff up an entire army and carve them up for breakfast. Floating overhead, Henri Le Massif and Royal Hippogryph Knights are much the same. They have the true Grail Knight treatment here, quite a bit more potent than vanilla, and they also have Killing Blow, which gives them more damage and unbreakable for a short duration. So the strat here is to keep a big section of the heavy hitters around Henri and Repanse, stack up all their buffs because they have a lot to share with the boys, and basically just mollywop a flank before the Dark Elves have a chance to react. Isolate the big monsters in Cav, pick them off one by one using that patented Bretonnian mobility, and from there, the infantry should hopefully be easy pickings. Easier said than done though. For the Dark Elves of Ganeth, we're looking at a wide army composition, Dark Shards and Dreadspear, supported by the Terror of the Deeps, a Kharbidyss. Its toxic venom ensures it can still be lethal even after an opponent has disengaged, and Abyssal Howl means the peasants will essentially break on contact when they see that bad boy stomping their way. Supreme Sorceress has Doombolt, Blade Wind, Word of Pain, Chill Wind, and Soul Stealer, so full spell selection almost here. And she's supported by the Bolt Fiends, who have 200 range and a special ammunition type that breaks shields. So, Dark Shards, with all that AP and 200 range, yeah, it's nothing to scoff at. That's a pretty potent combination there as well. In a normal situation, a Kharbidyss would have some issues getting Bretonnian Cav to actually fight, landing hits on them because it's pretty slow. So that's where the Cold Ones and Dreadknights come in. They have enough speed to tie up Hippogryphs and Grail Knights and basically prevent them from moving and allow that sea monster to close the gap and get some nasty attacks in. And it's also important to remember that for Murderous Prowess and Murderous Mastery, the second stage will last for the entirety of the battle once it pops. So all Dark Elf units, no matter who you are, from lowest to the highest noble, they'll all get a slight stat boost no matter how long combat lasts, which is pretty important for the Dark Elves, I feel like. Now, there is an inherent weakness with putting all your eggs in one basket as Bretonnia's elite. If you bring a lot of Grail Guardians, a lot of Grail Knights, a lot of Royal Hippogryph Knights, especially against the Dark Elves, they have a lot of ways to punish you at a pretty cheap price point. Dark Shards and their Focus Fire. Tons of AP, not an expensive unit at all. They can fill the sky with tons of armor-piercing bolts, and that will hurt. So you gotta be careful if you're gonna go this heavy on the elite, because if you get tied down and take a poor engagement, the Dark Elves are one of the races best suited in Warhammer, in Mortal Empires, for punishing that kind of play. With that said, their cavalry certainly outclasses even the Dreadknights of Ganeth, so if they get a good engagement, get a rear charge in with Henri Le Massif and the Royal Hippogryph Knights, they should be just fine. As is tradition, the poopy peasants will go first. In chess, the pawns are first unto the breach, and they will clog these Dreadspears up with their peasant dead. It's gonna be a bad fight for them. It always is. There's not a whole lot you can do with a pitchfork on the battlefield of Warhammer. They shall die, and they shall die in droves. They have 260 models a unit in SFO on Ultra Unit size, which is where SFO is balanced, so many of their number will fall in the opening stages, but they're gonna do what they're supposed to, which is just clog up the Dreadspears and allow the rest of the Bretonnian elite to find some squishier targets and get in maybe at the Dark Shards in the rear. Henri Le Massif landing in the center of a big ol' squadron of AP crossbows, and he shall feast. But it's important for the Dark Elves to not overreact to this kind of fight. Like, sure, your Dark Shards have just gotten tied down by a Hippogryph. You're not going to be able to shut down Henri and the Royal Hippogryphs and Repanse with her Grail Guardians. They're on two separate wings right now. Focus on one, and I think the Dark Elves are right to shadow Repanse and the Grail Guardians. They are the more important units right now. It's a lot harder to tie down the Royal Hippogryphs because of their takeoff abilities, because of their ability to create space and get up into the air. So focus on the stuff that will have a harder time disengaging, and that is what we're going to see here. The Cold One Knights and the Dreadknights, they are bounding forward, licking their lips in anticipation, trying to get that full surround off on the Grail Guardians, and because of the changes to mass and the way cavalry works now, disengaging from infantry is a lot more difficult, and they have already caught out a Grail Guardian unit, and look at how fast they are dropping. And they're trying to disengage, which means their melee defense is dropping to 0. That's why they are already down to half HP. But, I mean, this is a ton of armor piercing and bonus for charge going their way anyway, so that's a great engagement for the Dark Elves. Regrowth is the only thing that's going to keep those Grail Guardians in the fight, and that was painful. They've only lost one model. They do have Grail Vitality. They'll synergize incredibly well with healing, but not how the Knights of Lyon wanted to start their crusade here. A lot of Peasant Bowmen firing, getting some good focus fire, and a Blade Wind from the Supreme Sorceress on the Peasant Archers in the rear, dropping a nasty Vortex, and that will slice and dice a whole bunch of poopy peasants and send them into the ether. Brutal, savage, wrecked. And probably not a bad idea to spend some Winds of Magic trying to shut down those archers in the rear anyway. They have a nice line of sight to fire into the scrum. They'll do some damage to the Cold One Knights, and perhaps more importantly, to the Kharbidyss with some focus fire. And right now, with the Royal Hippogryph Knights on Overwatch, the Cold One Knights can't afford to dive into the rear and try to shut down the archers. So Vortexes, some damage spells there, might be the best way to do so. Halo of Maidenly Wrath, Royal Hippogryph Knights, and Henri Le Massif with a full surround off on the Kharbidyss. It's isolated, and it might drop very quickly. Henri has 500 weapon strength and a ton of bonus for large to boot, so not a good fight for the monster at all. But here comes a Doom Bolt on the peasants, and immediately, as this thing rains down, evaporating a huge section of the Bretonnian army. Nasty cast from the Supreme Sorceress, whose magic has already made a big impact on this battle. Murderous Prowess has popped, and the Cold One Knights, the Raptor Cavalry, are doing fantastic. They've dropped one Grail Guardian down to half HP, and that's great value for them, considering how expensive the Elite of Bretonnia are. And now they're looking to tie down Henri and perhaps some of these Royal Hippogryphs as well. They have managed to escape. Henri has a takeoff ability, which increases his speed and causes an explosion, similar to Verminous Valor for Queek. So he has ways to disengage if he needs to. But as the battle lines start breaking down, that can leave the Dark Shards exposed, and now the Royal Hippogryph Knights can dive into the rear and start munching on some Druki booty. Grail Guardians also doing the same. They ran away from the Cold One Knights. They wanted no more part of that. The initial engagements definitely went the way of the Dark Elves, but now they have an opportunity to skirt out to the flank, use their maneuverability, and dive into the rear. Getting rid of all these AP crossbows is super important, especially for the Royal Hippogryph Knights, who have massive hitboxes, and they'll drop quickly to focus fire from the Dark Shards. So feasting on them is the play for now. Nothing really back here except a Dread Spear to tie them down or even deal damage, and Royal Hippogryph Knights, they have enough speed to not really worry about regular infantry anyway. So Grail Guardians, even though they have taken a lot of damage, they can now start giving it back to the Dark Elves. Soul Stealer hitting both Repanse and the Grail Guardians, though. Henri diving in, some heals will be going his way very soon, and the Cold Ones realize the threat posed to their back line. They're coming back now. They've chased off the majority of the peasant archers and the infantry, and now we're going to have a very important fight in the center of everything around Repanse, around that Fleur-de-Lis banner, and the cavalry that really wants to be focused on just murdering infantry and blending them. They'll be forced to fight bonus for large armor-piercing Raptor Cav with a Kharbidyss nearby. This is exactly what Bretonnia does not want. Repanse is in a bad way with some worse monsters. There's not a whole lot of places for her to go right now, she does not have the mass to push through all this stuff, and getting out of that situation might be incredibly difficult. The Royal Hippogryph Knights are going to be the game changers here, and if they want to do anything, they need to make the move now. They have to go in and get a full surround off. I'm kind of surprised to see the Cold One Knights peeling off from Repanse. They could probably kill her, but I guess they're going for the Grail Guardians, and to be fair, the Grail Guardians are likely a bigger threat, so it's probably not a bad move. But now that the terror is beginning to set in for the Raptor Cavalry, that's opening up some opportunities for the Royal Hippogryph Knights to charge in, get their rear charge off, and they have 90 charge bonus, almost 250 weapon strength, majority armor piercing. That's a devastating combination, particularly for heavily armored cav. You think you have the game in hand, you think you have the perfect combat that will see their lord and all their most expensive units die, and then the Royal Hippogryph Knights come out of nowhere with the brutal hammer and anvil, and suddenly everything is routing. Kharbidyss is routing. Cold One Knights are routing. Dread Knights just came back to the fold, but that Supreme Sorceress isn't going to do a whole lot in melee. They actually did a lot of damage to the Royal Hippogryph Knights, though. Remember, they have Grail Vitality, and they have not lost a model yet, so they will have regen, more health coming their way. The rout was probably a good thing for the Flyers of Bretonnia. They'll have some time to recoup, regenerate, and get ready to go back in when they are needed. Some Peasant Bowmen in the back of the map, some more Peasant Bowmen firing in on the Kharbidyss, trying to see it off the map, and Repanse in the middle of a bunch of Dark Shards. The Dark Elves have managed to push back pretty much everything on the Bretonnian side. With that said, Repanse and Henri have just been absolute tank lords in the center of the Dark Elf formations. And now with that Halo of Maidenly Wrath going off, she's able to push back all this infantry, deal some AoE damage, and most importantly, evoke the imagery of Joan of Arc rallying the people of France to Orleans. I remember the Joan of Arc campaign from Age of Empires 2, The Age of Kings. God, I love those cutscenes. The voice acting and storytelling still holds up to this day. It's super good, as does the gameplay, of course, but it's kind of funny to look back on it and how the French are portrayed. Oh, we gotta find, oh, and the final Grail Guardian gets cut down in the middle of everything. Yeah, it's funny to look back on it and think about how the French were portrayed as this tiny country and massive underdogs to the English in that campaign. They've been losing every single battle for the last 75 years. And then Joan shows up and single-handedly saves their people. It's a funny perspective. It makes sense because it's from the French perspective and you want to feel like the underdog in your campaign. But yeah, Joan is kicking some serious ass in this game for sure, and she is rallying the elite of Bretonnia to her side. They just saw off a unit of Dark Shards, and she's going in single-handedly to take on some more regiments and chase them off of the map, prevent them from firing at the more expensive and elite targets that still remain. All the Grail Guardians are gone now. The Dark Elves still have some elite heavy cavalry themselves. The Dread Knights are on the hunt, running down the Peasant Bowmen. Royal Hippogryph Knights and Henri le Massif will be looking to bring them to blows, and if they can, rip them apart. With a rear charge, they should be able to do so, but in a straight-up fight between the two, the Dread Knights might be able to make good account of themselves considering how much damage they've already taken. They're all low. Everything's low. It's been a torrid, bloody, brutal affair. Both sides are pretty much in tatters at this point, but the Kharbidyss is routing, and Henri, well, he's a monster killer. That's what he's born and bred to do, and that is exactly how he's going to finish off this freak of nature. He's going to shatter it completely. One more attack, that thing's gone. Now, the Royal Hippogryph Knights, they went in. Might have been smarter, actually, to hold on and wait for support from the Hippogryph over that just killed the Kharbidyss, or routed off the Kharbidyss, rather, because now Word of Pain has gone down, and the Royal Hippogryph Knights have 0 melee attack. Minus 45 melee attack is a big deal. There are very few units in the game, in Warhammer Fantasy, that will continue to kill once they've been punished that severely by a debuff. Now Henri is here, but they took a lot more damage than they probably should have. Great support from the Supreme Sorceress. They are going to manage to win the fight because of the help from the single entity Hippogryph, but that got close. It got very close. The Hippogryphs were very close to routing there. They're back up into the air now. And the Dark Elves have lost the majority of their most important and expensive troops. Their cavalry is gone, their Kharbidyss is gone, and this is where Repanse thrives. And she can dive straight into the middle of enemy infantry formations, cast that Halo of Maidenly Wrath, and just blow stuff up, carve people down, and unleash the power of her Fleur-de-Lis banner. Royal Hippogryph Knights are waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike, and here it will come. That patented hammer and anvil crunching blow coming in from the side, just smashing these Dark Elf squadrons. And the terror should begin to set in quite soon. The Dread Spears, they still have a lot of numbers, and they still have support from 2 Darkshard units that are coming over the hilltop now. But it'll take them a while to get here. And meanwhile, I mean, these are the elite of the elite when it comes to the Grail Knights of Bretonnia. Doombolt trying to take them out, but better against big blobs of infantry than it is against single entities. And even though it is going to clip one of the models there, it will not bring it down. Didn't really deal a whole lot of damage. Grail Vitality giving those flyers some regen. And at this point, now that the Dark Shards are isolated, these are the only units that would be able to bring them back into the fight. They don't have any infantry support or cavalry support on this side. And that's going to be over. That's everything gone for the Dark Elves and Bretonnia. With Repanse, Henri le Massif, and a handful of Royal Hippogryph Knights remaining, they are going to take this battlefield. So, Doomed World and that Raptor Cavalry. It did a great job of shadowing the Grail Guardians all game long, and it really made it difficult for those cavalry to do what they wanted to do. The Grail Guardians got 108 kills and 92 kills. They earned some chevrons. They certainly weren't terrible, but they were not able to cycle charge to get in and amongst the infantry and just blow stuff up, and it's mostly because those Dread Knights were so damn impactful. So 1,700 damage value, about 1,500 damage value, 2,400 on the Royal Hippogryph Knights, which were probably the MVPs alongside Henri for the Chevalier de Lyon. They did great, but yeah, the Grail Guardians, although they weren't terrible, they struggled because that Raptor Cavalry was always on their ass. Now, Repanse wasn't going to deal a lot of damage. You bring her for the ward save, and really, that 10% ward save was the reason the Grail Guardians lasted as long as they did, alongside the Lore of Life, of course. The Sorceress for the Dark Elves was awesome. 120 kills, got some great Blade Winds and Doombolt in. But yeah, the Kharbidyss and the Cold One Dreadknights were definitely the MVPs for the Dark Elves in this battle. 3,000 damage value on both those units. Bunch of chevrons earned. Dreadknights are a fantastic counter in SFO to Bretonnian heavy cavalry. Now, you don't want to let them get charged by Grail Knights and that kind of thing, of course. You don't want to let them get rear charged or flank charged by Royal Hippogryph Knights. But if you are able to tie them up with your much cheaper and much more cost-efficient Cold One Knights with their bonus for large and armor piercing, and then swoop in with the Dread Knights from behind, get that full surround off, they're fantastic in a drag-it-out fight. I mean, they are really one of those, they're kind of like Katana Cavalry from Shogun 2, but a lot more durable. You can just kind of throw them into any melee grind as long as it's not against armor-piercing halberds, and they will perform very well. They are quite a lot more durable, quite a lot more impactful in SFO than they are in the base game, and they were a really, really good unit here. The Bolt Fiends with their fire, their shield breaking, their armor piercing were a nice support as well, and the spells from the Supreme Sorceress, of course. But really, I think the engagements from the Dark Elf Cavalry were great. They just kind of got spread apart in the late game, and the flying from Bretonnia made it difficult to protect all the squishy bits of that Dark Elf formation. But hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next time.